Hello everyone, today I'm going to tell you about all of the books I read in May. I am so happy with everything I read in May. I actually ended up reading 8 books. That's so good for me. And although some of them are a little bit shorter, I am still classing them in my Goodreads. I don't care. And I am really nearly up to date with my Goodreads challenge now, which is the first time I've been this close all year pretty much, so I'm really happy about that as well. So the first book I got read was Matilda by Roald Dahl, and if you don't know what Matilda is about, it is about a little girl who's been sort of born into a family that doesn't appreciate her, and she ends up going to school, and at school she kind of knows about this beforehand, but she really starts discovering these powers that she's got. And she's also incredibly bright, and she loves to read. And at school she has a really, really horrible head teacher, and she decides to use her powers against the head teacher to get her own back. And it is so funny, it's so good. If you've not read Matilda, I definitely recommend it. It is absolutely fantastic. It's actually my favourite Roald Dahl book. I really relate to Matilda because she loves to read. I don't have her brains, but her reading love is exactly like mine. I adore reading, obviously, because I have a booktube channel. And I also love Miss Honey, Matilda's teacher, because she's just so loving and so caring and so kind to the children. And she's just the complete opposite to Miss Trunchbull, so it's nice having that contrast. Matilda's family, although they're horrible, they're so funny. I absolutely adore them. And they're hilarious to read about. I hate them, but I love them. It's kind of like that hate-love relationship. They're so funny to read about, but you can't stand them at the same time. And I also really liked seeing the differences between the book and the film as well, because the film is like my childhood film. I absolutely adore it. And there were some scenes in the film that aren't actually in the book at all, but the book still works really well and the film still works really well, so it's nice just seeing those differences. And I give this 5 out of 5 stars. It's my favourite Roald Dahl book, like I said before. I just love it. The next book I read was Broken Soup, and this is about a girl called Rowan who bumps into a stranger when she's out and about, and this stranger tries to give her a photograph, like a negative photograph. But this photo isn't actually hers, but this stranger thinks it is hers, and she's dropped it, so he tries to give her it back. But it's not hers, she is adamant it's not hers. When she gets this photo developed, she actually finds out this photo is of her dead brother, and she has no idea what's going on. She needs to work out how this photo's come about and why she's ended up with it. I love Stroma, Rowan's little sister. She is such a funny character and so likeable and so funny to read about. She's just brilliant. She kind of reminds me of Kitty from the To All the Boys I Loved Before duology. She's got that kind of personality. And I also loved Harper as well, the stranger, because he's quite adventurous and he's actually a really lovely character. So it was really, really nice to read about him, and I would love to actually see a sequel in his perspective because he is such an interesting character. The one thing I found about this story, and I've never had this before, is I could not picture Rowan as a girl, and I don't know why. I could only picture Rowan as a boy. I have no idea why this happened. It's never happened before, but if it's happened to you, will you please let me know? And if you can explain why this happens, even better, because I don't understand. I really like the concept of this story, but I do think there is a lot of space for story development because I just feel like it sort of stopped quite abruptly, and I don't know, I just feel like as I was really getting into it, that was the end of it, and it was sort of like, I kind of want to read a little bit more. But yeah, apart from that, I did really still enjoy it. And I give this book 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was Easier Trot by Roald Dahl, and this is about Mrs. Silver, who has a little tortoise called Alfie, and Mr. Hoppy, who lives above Mrs. Silver. And Mr. Hoppy really, really loves Mrs. Silver, and he's jealous of the attention Mrs. Silver gives to Alfie, a tortoise, because he wants that kind of attention off her. But he doesn't obviously get that attention, and Mrs. Silver has no idea that Mr. Hoppy actually is in love with Mrs. Silver. But one day Mrs. Silver's talking to Mr. Hoppy, and she says that she wished that Alfie would grow quicker because he's such a small little tortoise, and he should have grown a little bit bigger by now, and he hasn't. So Mr. Hoppy has this crazy idea as to how he can get Alfie to grow and how he can get Mrs. Silver to fall in love with him at the same time. It is such a cute little story. It is just adorable. I love it. It's really short, so it didn't take me long to read it all. And I definitely recommend it if you've got children and you need like a quick bedtime story. It's really good for that as well. I just think the character personalities in this story was so cute. I loved all of them. They're just really, really sweet characters. And I loved the illustrations as well, and I think these really helped bring Alfie to life specifically because his descriptions weren't really there, but the illustrations definitely helped with that. And for this one, I give it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was also a Roald Dahl book, and that was George's Marvellous Medicine. And this is about George Cranky, who lives with his parents and his grandma, and his grandma needs medicine at certain times of the day. So, as George doesn't get along with his grandma very well, and he thinks she's grumpy and horrible to him, when his parents are out, he decides to make this new medicine for her, and basically just puts everything into this pan and stirs it up. And he thinks by making this that that's going to make her nice again. But that's not exactly the case, and it has other implications naturally, both physically and mentally, so it is just really funny and really crazy. I loved Grandma in this story, even though she's horrible. I think she is absolutely hilarious. She is one of the funniest characters I've read about. She's just so grumpy and horrible, but so funny, and you can't help but love her. You've just got to love her. And I also thought it was really funny that when George's parents got back, that George's dad had absolutely no care in the world that George had done this, and instead seen money potential and tried to get George to make this medicine again so he could make money out of it. Although this is obviously aimed at younger readers, I think anyone can read this story. It is so funny. And I do think, even though the plot's quite simple, the imagination and sort of detail is so intricate in this story, and it is definitely good for any kind of age to read, to be honest. I don't think you've got to be young to read it. And I also give this book 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I finally got read was Breaking Dawn by Stephanie Meyer. Yes, I eventually read this book, and I actually quite enjoyed it, and I wasn't expecting to because I didn't really like Eclipse. If you somehow don't know, this is the 4th book in the Twilight series and the final book, so I've now finished the series again, which is brilliant because that's another series reread, which I'm so happy about. Through this book, I thought that the story development and the character development were definitely better than they were in Eclipse. I definitely found Eclipse very flat, so it was nice to see that it developed more and the pace of this story got a lot quicker again. I love Alice Cullen still. Alice is one of my favourite characters, but I also found a new love for Emmett. I just think Emmett is hilarious and so sarcastic and so quirky, and when he's taken the mick out of Bella, it's even funnier. And that's because Bella still really annoys me. She is such a bland, boring character, and I feel like she is one of the main reasons this story can get really slow in places. I definitely think that the descriptions of the locations and the characters and everything were better in this story again than Eclipse, because, like I said, Eclipse was just very flat for me, so I'm really glad that this story did pick up again. And I did give this a 3 out of 5 stars. I don't feel like I can give it any more. It's quite a sort of alright series. I wouldn't say it's good, I wouldn't say it's bad, I definitely wouldn't say it's great. So yeah, 3 stars in the middle. And the next book I read was If I Stay by Gail Forman, and this is about Maya, who ends up in a car crash with her family, and she ends up in a coma in hospital. And while she's in this coma, she's also having this sort of out-of-body experience. And so we see this story through Maya's perspective still, even though she's in a coma, because we see it through this, like, Maya who's in the hospital but is like wandering around and no one can see her sort of situation. It's really hard to explain, but I hope you kind of understand what I'm meaning. And this story is sort of based around whether Maya wants to live or die, because obviously she's in this coma, and I don't want to spoil anything, but yeah, there's reasons why she can't decide whether she wants to just die or whether she actually wants to come back to life. I really like the different sort of take on this story, as in the perspective, because I don't think I've ever read that kind of perspective before. I've read, obviously, perspectives from characters that are alive. They're the usual kind of perspectives you read from. I think the closest to that would probably be in The Stuff of Nightmares, I reread quite recently. That aspect is quite similar, but not the same, so it was really nice to read this. I really got attached to Maya eventually in this story, even though she did annoy me a little bit as well. I just started feeling really sorry for her, and I just wanted to be okay, and she just needed to pick herself up a little bit more. It's quite a hard-hitting story, and you do just generally start to feel quite sorry for her. I also really grew to like Adam, Maya's boyfriend. I found him a really sweet, loving character, and really caring, and I kind of didn't expect that for some reason, and I don't know why, but I did really enjoy that. I wish we could have learned a lot more about Maya's family, because you don't really get to learn that much about them, and I really think I would have liked them a lot if I got to learn more about them, so that's kind of annoying, but yeah, that's probably one of the only negative things I would say about this story. One of the things I really loved is reading about Maya's love for classical music. Now, I don't tend to listen to a lot of classical music, but I really find it interesting. I don't know what it is about it, I just find it quite an interesting genre of music. So that was a really great element for me to read about. I definitely think the story could have been a lot faster in places, as it did slow down and it did feel like it was dragging in some places. But other than that, I did really enjoy it and I give it 3 out of 5 stars. And then straight after reading If I Stay, I read the duology second book, and that is Where She Went. And this is from Adam's perspective now. Maya's boyfriend, like I said before. Now, because this is the second book, I don't really want to say too much about it storyline wise if you've not read If I Stay, because then I'm going to spoil it and I don't want to do that. But I did really enjoy this book, and I love that it was from Adam's perspective, because I kind of really wanted that to happen after reading If I Stay. I thought the growth in the characters in this story was amazing, and they just changed so much and grew up so much, and I really like that, because a lot of sequels I've read, the characters are sort of still being the same and there's not been much development, whereas this, there was definitely a lot of development. And I love that the romance between Maya and Adam was still there, even though they're not together as such. I don't particularly want to spoil it, like I said, it's really hard to talk about. But yeah, I did really enjoy this story. I would say I enjoyed it as much as I did the first one, so for that reason I also give this 3 out of 5 stars. And I do think I will pick up more Gail Forman books as well in the future, because I do quite enjoy her writing. And the final book I read in May is probably one of my favourite books of the year now, and that was The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I completely understand the hype this book gets now. It is so important, and just, this is going to be one of these ones that I'm not going to be able to talk about very much because I can't get my words out. But this is about a black girl called Star, and she witnesses her friend get shot by a white policeman. And because of this is going to be really difficult for Star to get justice for her friend because of the racial differences and the lack of equality between white and black people. This is inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States, and I'm not obviously from the United States and I don't live there, but I do think it's important for everybody to read. Once Star starts getting encouragement from her friends and family about speaking out, she does end up doing this, but I'm not going to say it's easy for her, and it just, yeah, a lot of things happen. It's really hard, like, to not spoil things, but just please read this book. It is insanely good. I can't fault it. It is just too good. It just covers such hard-hitting topics in such amazing ways, and the writing is just beautiful without it being about beautiful things, if you see what I mean. It's just written so well, and Angie Thomas has done such a good job of writing this story. So some of the topics in this book involve racism, gang culture, fighting for equality, obviously police brutality, and the messages this book gives are just incredible and are brought across and portrayed really, really well. I just felt so bad for the characters that were having to fight for this justice, and it just, this kind of thing should not be happening in the world, and it really makes me angry and upset, and I really wish I could just change all of this, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that would say the same. It's just so upsetting, and I just want the world to move on from all of this and be a much nicer place. And this, although obviously there's stuff happening like this in the United States, there's other things happening in the UK, especially at the minute as well, obviously elsewhere in the world as well, but a lot is happening in the UK at the minute which is just horrendous as well, and I wish I could change all of that. Because this was such a hard-hitting book and it made me feel every emotion, I did naturally get attached to a lot of the characters in this story, and I just wanted to make everything right for them. The things in this story just need to be addressed and sorted out, and because this, although it is a story, this is happening in real life, and I just can't, I cannot, I told you I'll not be able to speak about this book. This is such an important read, and I definitely recommend you give it a read because it is just incredibly good and beautifully written. And so important, like I said, please read this if you haven't already. I do think this is one of these stories that is going to go down in history as one of the most important reads of its time because it's just so good. there's not much else I can say about this because I can't get my words out properly because it just makes me feel too many emotions. And obviously I'm going to give this 5 out of 5 stars, that goes without saying. So that is it for my May wrap up. I hope you've enjoyed it. I am so happy with all the books I read during May, and I'm hoping you are happy with all the books you read as well. Let me know what your favourite read of May was, as I'd love to know. That's it for today. If you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe. All of my social media links are in the description below for you to go check out if you want to, and I will see you all in my next video very soon. Bye!